everyone to tonight's Audit Committee meeting. Lovely to see you all, both in the room and virtually. We've got some special guest stars tonight, so I will say hello to you and welcome you all. Big hello to Will, Kate, Mark, Vicky, Claire, Nicola from Deloitte, Neil, Alan, Neil as well, our chief, and Chloe, and Arif as well. And as you probably could tell as I read those names out, I definitely need to go to the opticians. My eyes are really going. So welcome tonight, everyone. How we tend to work it, for those who've not attended an audit committee before, we go to members and officers in the order that the hands go up. For those who are virtually, just either wave or indicate that you want to speak, and I'll bring you in. And for those in the room, just put your hands up. Right, without further ado, we will make a start. Agenda item 1, declarations of interest. Do you have any declarations of interest at all? Councillor Critchley. That's it. So it's a personal interest. That's it. Just say that you're, a member of Bockle. Brilliant. Excellent. Well done, Councillor Critchley. Councillor Burdis.
Thanks, Chair. Again, same item. I'm a non-executive director of Blackpool Transport Service, so personal interest, but if you're discussing financial matters, then pecuniary interest.
Brilliant. Thank you, Councillor. Do we have any other interests? Councillor Roberts?
Personal interest in the item on page 75, non-executive director of Blackpool.
Brilliant. Okay. And likewise, a non-executive director of Blackpool Transport declare a personal interest for the agenda item 7, page 75. Right, we will move on. Agenda item 2, minutes of the last meeting held on the 11th of November. Do we take them to be a true and correct record? Okay, now then, what we're going to do tonight is the first item up is the audit follow-up, but I believe, Arif, you're short of time, so what we're going to do is move your agenda item, which I believe is being covered through the annual governance statement update, first, if we may. So that's agenda item 6. Mark, is that you to provide the update? Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. This is the 6 monthly update, or the half-yearly update. It's not quite 6 months. I think the AGS was actually approved by the committee in September alongside of the annual accounts. Just as a reminder, the annual governance statement is the review of the previous year, looking at the internal controls and the governance framework and the effectiveness of that. And along with the AGS that's approved is also an action plan. So the action plan isn't about business critical issues, it's about sort of good practice that the committee and the officers and the council wants to develop within the next 12 months. What we have done in recent years is have this as a 6-month review where items that we've identified in that first period, look at the progress on those and see if those have been implemented. And again, looking at the progress on the items that are due to be completed throughout the rest of the year. So the action plan update is attached to the agenda item. I think with regard to Arif, it was just sort of flagged up as a key one on there. I know that committee members may have some questions about, so he's here to provide some information on that. That's the community strategy. But myself and colleagues around the virtual table can assist if there's any questions from members about the action plan.
Brilliant. Thank you, Mark. That was an excellent summary. Thank you. And thank you for all the work everyone's doing on that. I believe Councillor Roberts and Jill will be leading our response on this item. Councillor Roberts?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, evening, Mark. Thanks very much for the report. Just on page 43, we've lost a lot of key opportunities to meet on a regular basis, face to face. how do you think the refresher training that's been completed has gone in light of the pandemic? How's it been received? Do you think we're losing anything? And what steps will we take this year to try and fill in any gaps that have happened over the last 12 months?
Okay, thank you, Chair. So the training, I think on this part, just looking at those, is in relation to the code of conduct. So that code of conduct is due to go to the Standards Committee in February. We've actually had the workshops with both Fylde and Blackpool representatives from their standards committees. I must say that I think there were some elements, more the knowledge-based ones, that are very easy and effective to do through sort of virtual training, and they can be done to sort of build up knowledge. I do think actually with regard to face-to-face training, something like a workshop like we had with this, we would have felt would have been better on a face-to-face setting. And I think it's getting that balance of training going ahead if once we're supported and permitted to sort of be back in the room and doing training sessions on a face-to-face basis. I think some of the interpersonal training is probably more effective on that level. Perhaps some of the more knowledge-based training does work quite well on a virtual setting, particularly if it's sort of a short, sharp burst, like a 45 minutes or an hour setting. So I think there's a blend there, and as we move forward, we'll work with members to try and make sure the training is appropriate and does fit in with availability and the type of training that we think would be better face to face. We can arrange around a suitable time for members.
Thanks, Mark. Just moving on to page 46, just a question for Arif. Do you think we've faced any challenges in delivering the objectives with the partners that we've been involved with, Arif?
Good evening, everyone. Was that specifically in relation to the community engagement strategy, Councillor Roberts?
Yeah. How's that going?
Yeah. So with the community engagement strategy, as you know, it's been delayed with the pandemic response. But I'm pleased to say that we're at the stage where it's in its final stages of development. It's currently out for comment with internal departments. And following that, we'll seek feedback from other external stakeholders, including our NHS partners and VCFS partners, before it goes to all the relevant meetings where it needs to be signed off. So I'm expecting it to be sort of fully signed off and all agreed and achieved by March of this year. So that's the deadline we're currently working towards.
And do you think there's going to be any challenges in delivering that, Arif?
No, I think we've adapted it because we've learned a lot during the pandemic in terms of the pandemic response, and we felt that we needed to incorporate all the things that we've learned in terms of our community engagement work that we've done during COVID, and incorporated that into the new strategy. So I think actually the new strategy will be, dare I say it, much better than the previous draft.
That's great. Thanks, Arif. And just moving on to a question for the Chief Executive, actually, on page 52 with regard to hybrid working. And the effectiveness of and the productivity that we've seen over perhaps the last 12 months. How are we going to sort of hold on to some of that going forward with the move back to the office?
We've been doing quite a lot of work with services over the last year, really, about how we will keep the best of the things that we've had to do differently during the pandemic, as well as bring back some of the things that we've missed in terms of, sort of collaborative working and joint working. So we've got a working group which is representative of all parts of the organisation to get all that learning together. So some areas will probably be back to 90% of what they were before, and others will probably be in a much more 50-50 way. So though that working group will be giving us recommendations as we gradually move back towards what would be considered more normal working. We've got a report coming to our corporate leadership team on Tuesday about the next steps in that since the announcements of this week. around ending the encouragement to work from home. So we've had a lot of services who've always been frontline and always been in, and others very differently. So it is taking an approach which is very much nuanced across services, so we can deliver them the best way possible for the community. So some of that is absolutely essential that we're face-to-face and collaborative, and others, actually, we've been more efficient in terms of delivering services to the public by doing it very differently, because we had to rethink everything.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Roberts. Thank you, Chief. Jill, do you want to come in?
Sorry, just having difficulty unmuting. Thank you, Chair. Mark, if I may just bring your attention to page 59. You do mention in this half-year review about the stakeholder committee for the wholly owned companies. Now, in relation to the report that was done by Mersey Internal Audit, they did find the need to strengthen some of the internal control processes and the risk management. So I would have expected probably some reference to that, about getting that work completed by the end of the year. Would that be appropriate, do you think?
Chair, if I could come in on there. Yes, certainly it's actually due to go to our shareholder committee tomorrow, is that report, that internal audit report. So it was commissioned by the shareholder, and it is due at the shareholder committee, as I say, in the morning. There is one, I think as Tracy defines them, sort of number one priority sort of recommendation, and that is around risk. And we were disappointed to get the limited assurance, but it's purely on the basis that there is no coordination evidence sort of information that the shareholder has regarding the risk across the company. So each of the companies undertakes a risk register, strategic risk register, and what was found in the audit was that wasn't systematically presented to the shareholder committee. Information was presented through the MD's reports and updates to the shareholder committee, but the actual registers themselves weren't shared with the committee on an evidence basis. So we've already been put steps in place to try and rectify that, and those will be brought forward, and there'll be a strategic risk register across all companies that Tracy will coordinate and be presented as well. So the strategic risk registers are there. The risks are known by the shareholder. It was purely on the basis that there wasn't the evidence there to demonstrate that systematic monitoring by the shareholder. So each of the companies has an audit committee. They have their own strategic risk register. It's just pulling that together and evidencing that, which isn't a big task, but it's one that was flagged up as a key one for us to look at.
Okay, thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Jill. Thanks, Mark. Just one question from myself, Mark. It's a general question. Have you come across any departments or areas where the teams have been either reluctant to participate or just too busy managing demand to participate?
Chair, I wouldn't say that there's anybody been reluctant. I think we've quite a well-established corporate leadership team now and senior leadership team, and again that helps understand the importance of governance. And I think I would say that departments have been wholly supportive and understand that governance is everybody's responsibility in terms of that side of things. I think there may have been one or two areas that maybe have not been progressed as quickly because of the pandemic, but definitely not with regard to a department's input or a chief officer's input.
Excellent, thank you, Mark. So you're fairly comfortable about where that stands as to regards to everybody's inputs. Brilliant. And the only final point, and this is a discussion that we've had for some, I'll bring you in, Councillor Hunter, is when this document is completed, and it's a compliment to yourself and the team, is that part of the narrative, and I know this is a discussion that we've had in the past, must also include some of its achievements as well, and that we actually draw attention to those. Positive change, positive delivery through change, those types of examples that will encourage everybody to embrace not only the work but also the importance of the AGS. So it's just a note to yourself to sell yourself. Sorry, just bear with me. I'll just bring Councillor Hunter in, if I may.
Thank you, Chair. I thought for the moment then we're going on to the next item and had been missed altogether, so sorry for interrupting. It's just really a point of clarification, actually, and I'm not sure who will clarify it, probably Neil. It's going back to page 52, the point that Councillor Roberts raised. It's the final paragraph. The council core offices will reduce from 7 to 10 desk ratio to a 5 to 10 desk ratio. It's quite pleasing to see the number of employees being less than the number of desks, because with the move in many offices in recent years to hot desking and that, it's a change to see the number of desks greater than the number of employees. The only question really is, with a 5 to 10 desk ratio, what proportion, if that was to be taken up fully on any given day, what proportion of the council officers would actually be in situ in a council building? Just a proportion.
Up to full speed, if you like, at that sort of 5 to 10, we would expect to see the majority of the desks being used, because what we're looking at is rationalising our property overall. So when we first moved into Bickerstaff House, we used to have one desk for every member of staff, regardless of whether they were term time only or whether they did a number of days a week, not taking into account leave or sickness or anything else. So there was always a lot of desks empty. When we moved into Bickerstaff, we moved to the 7 to 10 desk ratio. So you would see the majority of desks filled on any given day, because it did take into account all of those different patterns. So the move towards 5 would actually see the majority of the desks being used, but it also would allow us to leave any buildings which are unnecessary at that point and save money. So we're already looking at that within South King Street in terms of delivery of service there, about how we can move more people into the space that we already have. So the desks that remain, we would expect to see busy most of the time.
Councillor Burdess.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a question for Mark, and it's just for clarity for me. I hear what you say about the shareholder committee just pulling together the audit functions of the wholly owned companies. Am I misunderstanding? Is there an element? Sorry. So yes, can you hear me now? Okay, sorry, I'm kind of turning away because my iPad's plugged in somewhere else, so apologies for that. I hear what you say about the shareholder committee pulling together the arrangements with the wholly owned companies. What I'm not sure about is, have I misunderstood? Is there an element of like risk management there as well? I would hope there is, right? In terms of our exposure. Thank you.
That's what the audit is strongly recommending, that the risk elements are sort of evidenced and brought before the shareholder committee on a systematic basis. I think it was acknowledged that the likes of Mr. Jack, Mr. Thompson, Mr. Cavill understand the risks from as the shareholder officers on the council side. What wasn't evidenced was that the shareholder committee, which includes the leader, deputy leader, and Councillor Clapham, haven't seen that evidence of the risk when they're being presented by the managing directors. So the idea is to bring those strategic risk registers to the committee on a regular basis to allow that to be monitored more formally. So it is an important element that will be on a regular cycle of the shareholder committee.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. That was excellent. What I'm going to do, I don't believe we have any further questions on the annual governance statement half-term review. What we're going to do is move on to another agenda item that isn't in order, because I just want to capture Chloe before she disappears as well. But Arif, before I move on to that item, just to say a huge thank you again for your time and all the work that you do. And as councillors, we all really appreciate everything that you and the team do. Okay, see you soon, Arif. Chloe, I'm just going to bring us on to agenda item 8, which is the action tracker. I'm not sure if you're there, Chloe, at all. I see you on the screen.
Couldn't find my unmute button. I'm here.
Oh, well done, brilliant. Good to see you, Chloe, brilliant. I thought if I do it this way, then I'll liberate your night as well by...
Oh, that's amazing. Thank you very much.
Just asking you the one question that concerns yourself. On our action tracker, we've just got something that's flashing red at us, which means it's something we have to action. A year ago, we discussed the local voluntary community faith sector, and that there are delays in terms of our partnership work with Lancashire because obviously the pandemic. And it was noted in that meeting that it would be just brought forward as an update for the committee to see if progress had been made. So it was, if you could just give us a brief summary if there has been any more progress.
Yeah, so everything's gone quiet on that front in terms of the Accord. A lot of the work that's taken place across LCC and across the Lancashire-wide footprint has been around VCFS partnership work in terms of the NHS and in terms of social prescribers. So a lot of the work is taking place around that. They've also perfectly timed their community engagement strategy so that we've been developing them alongside each other. So that's taken the majority of their focus, and it looks like the Accord is actually fallen back behind the development of the strategies. So at the moment it's quiet. It doesn't sound like it's going to get picked up again. It looks like it's kind of developed into a strategy document for LCC and NHS partners.
Okay, thanks, Chloe. That's sufficient for where we are, and I'm sure through the community engagement policy and work that will also be picked up as well. So yeah. I don't believe members have any questions for you on that. So Chloe, the good news is you've just gained your night off now.
Thank you very much. Have a nice evening.
Yeah, take care, Chloe. Thank you.
Bye.
Right, committee members, what we'll do is we'll go back to the original batting order. So we're now back to agenda item 3, which is the audit follow-up on flood management. Now, I believe we have some special guest stars. Lovely to see you, Claire. Lovely to see you, Will, and Neil, I believe. Neil Williams, that's right. So the only problem we've got, team, as much as I would love to sit here all night and hear you describe the different challenges that you face, we don't have a great deal of time. So if I work through this item at a fairly good speed, please don't take that as a criticism, take it more as a compliment. We've allocated around 20 minutes for this item, so if you could provide us with a 5-minute summary, that would be really helpful to ourselves. Then we should have some time for good questions and answers. Claire, do you want to go for it, or Will?
Yeah. Want me to start, Will? Can you pick up? Yeah. Okay, I'll crack on. I'll be looking over the instruction because I've pulled up the recommendations. So if that's okay, what I suggest is that I go through the recommendations of the audit report.
If you do all that in 5 minutes, Claire, then do it.
Yeah, I'll do that. I'll whiz through it, and then because Will's got some more exciting things to show you. So in terms of item 1, which was around the strategy, we have now completed the update. So we did do a timeline, and the strategy was approved in November last year. So we believe we concluded that agreed action. The second action was around a certified process of iPool, and I think Neil will pop in on that one in a minute, but we haven't actually undertaken iPool, but we have put in place training for officers, and we had a training day last year. In terms of item 3, the detailed work plan and business plan, that is actually attached to the strategy. So there is a quite comprehensive business plan attached to our strategy, which we will be monitoring, but not only monitoring locally, we'll also be monitoring through the Lancashire Strategic Partnership and the Lancashire Tactical Group, because it's a joint strategy. So that will be monitored by many people. So in terms of recommendation 4, roles and responsibilities, we have got a mapping process. I think there was a little bit confusion with members of various members of different teams about who does what. So we have now planned that out, and there is a definition. So strategy, for example, sits with myself, and operational sits with Will, and the teams all kind of know what we're doing. So we've planned that out. In terms of recommendation 5, the aid memoir, that again, that is something to do with the post-flood events and work that Neil and his team have done really well on pulling together what we do during an event and after an event. And we've also used the Regional Flood and Coastal Committee Section 19 report as an example in our training event to show what is required when people are out in an event. So that should run a lot smoother. Recommendation 6. So that, again, that links into roles and responsibilities, which is all mapped out. Recommendation 7. So recommendation 7 really is an ongoing and will be forever ongoing. So that's around mapping out hotspot areas in the town. That's in our strategy and our business plan, but we're going to do that anyway. Recommendation 8, the website. So probably one of the not the successful implementation of these recommendations is the website, but that is now ongoing following publication of the strategy. We've been talking to colleagues internally about making sure that our website is one of the best and that people can easily access information. And in particular, what we want to do, because we don't want to reinvent the wheel, Lancashire-wide we have a flood hub which is funded by the Regional Flood and Coastal Committee, and that holds all the information that anybody could possibly want around flooding. So we're highly recommending that, and that will sit on our website. Recommendation 9, the toolkit. I'll ask if Neil could discuss that going forward. So 10, 11 and 12, they're all related to post-event, which I think Neil's going to pick up to take over. Flood risk assets, Neil, Will's going to talk to you about that one. And item 14, the work plan for policies. The policies that we have in connection with flood risk management are outdated. In the business plan that I mentioned at the beginning, we have a section in there where we're going to review, Will's team are now going to review the policies that we've got, and they will sit on the website. And hopefully, I think that's me.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah.
So what we'll do before we go to questions, we'll just bring in, is it Neil next? Did you want to square off a couple of points, Neil?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, a couple of points. The first one, just to give some assurance around the training for duty officers. So, as Claire said, we did a tabletop exercise last summer. Some of those actions, as a result of recommendations from that exercise, we're working through. However, we do have 3 further training events in relation to flooding for our duty officers penciled in for this year. 1 in February and 2, one of which includes a further exercise, which will be a multi-agency exercise in September later this year. And the other one, recommendation 5, just to pick up on quickly, in terms of roles and responsibilities, those being documented and an aid memoir. We do have a documented flood plan which contains roles and responsibilities. They are documented, and there is a 1-page action card for each of those roles with responsibilities and tasks that need to be carried out during the event of a flooding incident. They were the 2 that I wanted to pick up, and I'll just also mention, I think recovery, Claire was passing to me as well. So the flood plan also takes into consideration recovery, and there is a recovery framework that we follow under the Lancashire Resilience Forum, which documents the recovery process I'm just conscious of time. I'm happy to go through those headings of the things that are in the recovery plan. But take it from me, there's assurance there that there is a recovery framework in place. I'm happy to go into more detail if you want me to. Thank you, Chair.
That was an excellent summary, Neil. Thank you very much. You did incredibly well there with the time that you had. Thank you. We appreciate that. Will, do you want to just come in on anything that's been missed? Oh, you're muted, Will. I know Will. Oh, there we go.
Yeah, I'll try and zip through some slides, but if it doesn't work, then I'll just revert back to. Can everybody see that?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Obviously, climate change isn't going to go any better. You know, it's things are going to go worse. So just to make a point, really, that flooding's here to stay, and predictions are that weather all over the world will get worse. This was historic flooding on the promenade, which has been kind of solved with the construction of the new seawall, but then again, sea levels are rising. So who knows in the future. I think the main thing about all of this really is that is it's ties straight into the heart of the prospectus, the town prospectus, in terms of community and resilience. Obviously, people in Blackpool are in fear in some areas of flooding, repeated flooding. And what we've been looking at highways for many years now, it's about data. And, sometimes it's this circulation of facts, feral data, historic data in people's heads, and all of this is local knowledge. And so we pride ourselves in local knowledge in Blackpool and, of course, in Lancashire as well. And there's a strong tie-up with that and with Clare. The types of flooding that you can get, obviously, from the coastal or river, there's groundwater flooding as well, which actually can occur in many basements, and people often ring the council and say, there's water under the floor, and but the advice is just to leave it. Obviously, it can come from highway drainage if gullies are blocked, but again, we kind of plan our maintenance on our own drainage systems. I think some of the main causes can be the main sewers, hydraulic inadequacy, and pumping station failure, which we notice in Anchor's. So there we go. Historically, Devonshire Road Bridge, that keeps occurring, and that actually is down to United Utilities sewers hydraulic, volumes. And there we are again. Even though this is a kind of a cost to property and vehicles, you mustn't forget the vulnerable residents in the town who are suffering when these events occur. And obviously this strategy links all of these things together. Just to go through in Blackpool, this is a type of system that some towns have, but in the older towns, this is a separate system where surface water goes through one pipe and drainage, foul sewage goes through another. Where in Blackpool, this is really predominantly what we have. We have a combined system. So all the surface water, the rainwater on the highways runs into the same pipe as the sewage. And this isn't Blackpool, but this shows you what happens. And when there's flooding, you get this combination of surface water and foul water, which enters this water. And so therefore you get raw sewage going into the houses, which is what has happened in many parts of Blackpool. So as Blackpool was built, this is the picture in 1930 with, sort of the central area. And as Blackpool grew, the sewers were built in line with that construction. So this is United Utilities sewer system. And as you can see, what's happened is, if I show the next slide, the water courses that are in Blackpool were simply intercepted and put back into the sewers. So actually discharging to a water course or following SUDS, policies, really in some cases isn't that good, because you're just adding more water into the sewer system, whereby United Utilities are trying to restrict that flow to solve some problems. That's me actually underneath Anchor's sewer network back in the day. Just to show you the size of these things, you know, at peak storm, there's about 8 or 9 cubic meters per second entering that station. And they've got 14 pumps that can discharge each of them about 4 cubic meters a second. So it would empty an Olympic-sized swimming pool in about a minute. Again, that's another sewer in underneath Rigby Road. That's what can happen to some of these sewers, and you know, obviously they need to be repaired, like things like that happen. And this is Anchor's own pumping station, which has been the cause for concern for many years, because when that shuts down, you get a tidal wave of water coming backwards up the system, and that wiped out Anchor's own. That's happened about 6 times now, to my recollection.
Sorry to interrupt, Will. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Have you got many more slides to show us? Is that brilliant?
And obviously, when flooding happens, you get these types of issues. And not only is that a community fear, but it can also mess up the fabric of the highway as well. Okay, that's it.
That's great. Thanks, Will. Really appreciate your efforts and all your hard work as ever, as Neil and Claire accordingly. Committee members, I just want to remind everyone it's very easy with this subject to border into a scrutiny area. We obviously have a place for that. Our role tonight is just to cover the audit, which is here before us. So, Councillor Scott, I believe you're going to ask some questions and be our lead on this.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Well, first of all, thank you for all three of you for that comprehensive report, especially the slides at the end, very interesting. I'll start with the first question, but I think Claire's already answered that. The importance of the flood hub, and that's going to be incorporated into the website, which is a good thing because the public will be relying on that as the main source of information. I'll go on to recommendation 12 on page 19. And are there any areas where United Utilities or the Environmental Agency haven't shared any information that you'd require?
Do you want me to pick that up, Will? About the asset register?
Yeah, well, they've been very good, really, and we have a sharing space for water meeting with them, and so the asset that they hold and are responsible for, they have shared that data with us, and we've mounted that onto a web-hosted mapping system, which is internally known as GAST. And that actually can link into the website, and it can be, you know, the public could actually get access to that. So that's kind of in development, you know, and we're part of the scene.
Okay, thank you. Moving on. On recommendation 13, it's recommended that a systematic process should be in place to ensure flood risk assets are regularly inspected. Now, is that, and on the following, the agreed action about some processes are in place for inspection, so it's a bit higgledy-piggledy, if you will. Is there going to be a new planned preventive maintenance regime, and is that going to be put on a database so that, you know, we as councillors or anybody can look at that and say, you know, before you know, the finger starts pointing at United Utilities, that our side of things have all been done correctly, i.e. the drains have been, we can say, oh, hang on a minute, no, according to the plan maintenance regime, that area was done and all the drains are clear. It's not down to us, because, you know, especially the one in my particular ward, I forget the name, Valencia. You know, one particular person screaming maybe about midnight whenever it's any heavy rain. So it's just to be, you know, is that going to be picked up as I've said? Yeah,
it is. It's already in action. Valencia itself is actually United Utilities' problem. There's service history with the sewer, and it's got backfall. So that's certainly something for them to sort out. But nevertheless, and on top of that, we in Howers, we have one gully machine, and in Blackpool there are 27,000 gullies. So obviously we have to prioritise things. Yeah. And as a matter of routine cyclical maintenance, the gully machine goes around and clears and cleans the gullies, like I say, on a routine basis in accordance with a programme. And I know we concentrate and target sewers in Valencia Road and in Anchorshome and parts of central Blackpool as well, just to give the residents confidence that Blackpool is playing its part, even though sometimes these gullies don't need cleaning. And I think it's a visible sign that we need to show that Blackpool Council is undertaking its responsibilities, and it is a statutory function as well. We have called in additional crews from Lancashire because we share resources sometimes with Lancashire Council Cross Border Alliance. So we have brought in some of their crews as well to help. The other assets that we own, like the water courses and some highway drainage, all of that is inspected on a fairly regular basis. And the idea is that, we don't want to react to problems. There's maybe on a routine maintenance and planned maintenance that we have every year. For instance, water courses, we have planned maintenance programs in place whereby they are cleaned and cut back twice a year, once before the summer season and once after. So, we kind of know of problems before they actually occur. Sometimes it catches us out and, someone's fly tipped half a ton of rubble into a water course, which, happens near Eden Way quite a lot. But of course, again, with the communication and our colleagues in, in Becco now, we get onto that and sort it out.
Will, can I just add as well, I think the records of all this cleaning, so that if there is an event, that the accessibility of that information will be on the GAZE system that we can share.
Yeah, that's
on the
right.
website.
It's being developed so it'll hold all that the records of the maintenance. And, it's important to see the history of that because, residents would know then, it needs to be transparent so that, everybody's got things are being done.
Oh, that's great. Thank you very much. And just lastly, would it be possible that, I know this is to be put before the Tourism and Economic Scrutiny Committee, that some of this work, including a network map, a basic network map of who does what in a flooding situation, could be included in the flood risk plan?
Pick that up, Will. Yeah, so we have put together that, I think that was sort of included in the scrutiny, but I think we've embellished that really both in the strategy and in our mapping of who does what, so that people are absolutely clear, because even the best in the world, people do get a little bit confused about who's responsible for what. Yeah. So it extends beyond us as well, so that people are clear who to contact, and that it is a little bit overlapping with the Flood Hub because it does tell you on there, but yeah, we've done our own version, which we'll share.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. Excellent. And I don't believe we have any further questions. So just on behalf of the committee, Claire, Will and Neil, a huge thank you. It's clear that the progress has been made in this area is vast and is integrated, crucially. We look forward to seeing through the scrutiny process your continued development in this area. So thank you for your time and thank you for all your hard work. We really do appreciate it. And the good news is you're free to go. Thank you. Take care. Thanks again. So what we'll do, committee members, is move on to the Strategic Risk Register, change management. Now, this is quite a meaty item. It's divided into 3A, 3B, 3C. 3A is preventative early intervention services are unfunded or need to be made sustainable. I believe we're going to have Vicky and Pauline take us through these. So Pauline, if you could be very brief and just take us through the Head Start ones on page 28, and we'll then go to questions, and then we'll bring Vicky in.
Yes, happy to do that. So the good news is that Head Start sustainability strategy has been progressing really well. So we've got a very robust approach to sustainability, which commenced 18 months ago. And alongside the research and evaluation work that we've been doing, we've been very proactive about understanding the evidence and what shows what activity has been successful. So we've been ceasing the activity that hasn't shown success, but also been successful in embedding the activity that has. So to date, we've got 6 months left of the programme. So the programme will finish on the 31st of July, but really only have one element of the programme which we are currently in discussions with, and that's the co-production element of the programme. So my assessment of the risk here is that it's really low, and that we've had a really good response to the sustainability of the programme across the board. So I don't know if you want me to stop there, because that's the sustainability element of one of the risks, before I move on to the other one.
Yeah, do you want to square off the second one as well, Pauline?
Yeah,
and then we'll go to the questions.
Yeah, happy to do that. So embedding the learning from Head Start has been part of the programme since its inception, actually, because we have a very robust research element to the programme. So we've had continuous shared learning spaces through communities of practice, through annual learning events, which has enabled all different sectors across the town, including our community, importantly our community and our VCSFE organisations, who've worked alongside us and shared that learning as wide and as broad as possible. So currently we have an international conference that's planned for the end of March, which will be the culmination of our shared learning. But I think it's important to say that the success of the shared learning has actually been shown in the embedding of the successful activity. So all in all, I think that the picture here is a really positive one.
Absolutely, thank you, Pauline, for that. We have two questions. In terms of the sustainability phase, I believe Councillor Critchley, you have a question? Your microphone's...
Forget about the microphones. Not on mute now, are we? Thank you for that, Jill. I suppose I'm just looking ahead, as you all are, and you've done some fantastic work out there, and congratulations on the long-term funding commitment. But how long will that funding be for? I know you said long-term, but what we're talking, a year, 2 years, 3 years, how long will it be? And then how will you measure the success of the programmes through the data? Will it be quantitative as well as qualitative, or do you just work with one or the other? Is that all right to ask?
Absolutely, yes, really happy to answer those questions. So the first question around the length of funding, that depends on which project has been funded, because what we've done is we've I suppose sectioned off the different activities which formed the whole of the Head Start programme over the 5 years, so that we can be really robust about the clarity of the evaluation of each of those projects. So that kind of depends on the project. So, for example, the Friend for Life project will be sustained on a continual basis. The resilience coach team is funded through Schools Forum money, so that will be a recurrent process that we'll need to go through for that. So there are different funding structures for each of those different projects. So I hope that's kind of answered that question okay. As far as the research and evaluation is concerned, we've prided ourselves actually in being having a community co-research approach to the research that we've done. So young people, parents and carers, our voluntary sector organisations have been part of helping us to evidence the work that we've done. So there's been some very hard quantitative data that's been collected, particularly around our schools' performance, but also around surveying young people. And that's been a really robust process to that, but that's been combined with some really robust qualitative feedback. So lots of structured interviews with organisations that we've worked with young people, parents and carers, and our community organisations. So that's formed a really important part, and that can be really well evidenced through the annual reports that we've produced each year for the programme, and also from a very exciting point of view, our approach to the international conference at the end of March, where you'll see young people and parents and carers co-presenting the work alongside academics, to kind of really bring that approach to life. So it's an area we're particularly proud of in the programme.
Thank you, Pauline. Thank you, Councillor. As regards the implement and embed learning, I believe Councillor Burdess, you're going to respond.
Thanks, Chair. I just would like ask of Pauline to just give clarity about what evidence exists to confirm this has happened. If it exists, if already, then we don't need to see it, but I'm just interested because you've said there's been excellent progress with evidence, and that the change in systems and practices documented, but I don't seem to see that anywhere. So I don't know if I've missed it, if you can point us in the right direction, or if it doesn't exist, then is it available?
So the annual report is the mechanism that we report each year on the research and evaluation data that we have for the programme. And again, as I've said, that's quantitative and qualitative. So you'll find some hard data around outcomes from surveys with young people, some hard data about outcomes such as school exclusions, impact on school exclusions, for example. But there'll also be examples of feedback from young people and parents and carers and families in there as well. So that's the main mechanism that we use for evaluating that. But we also have some ad hoc work that we do. Sometimes that's evidenced through co-written blogs with young people and parents and carers. And they're on our website, as well as we funded some PhD students to do some very robust pieces of research on different areas of the programme. So that's been for the Friend for Life project. It's been around school exclusions, for example. So there's a variety of different ways, but I'm more than happy. We recently did a submission to the Sir Michael Marmot State of the Nation call around health inequalities, and we pulled together a really robust evidence submission for that. So I'm more than happy to share that, because that has some really exciting links to things like films that young people have created about the work that they've done, as well as some really hard evidence, validated evidence as well. So happy to share that.
Thank you. If that was circulated, that answers the question. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor Burdess. Councillor Critchley, you want to come back on that?
Thanks, Chair. Yes, sorry. It's at number 3A again, and it's increased financial obligations, and it's about the mental health of 10 to 16-year-olds. And you say you've secured funding for 12 months. Are you going to, behind the scenes, work towards securing more funding so that can be ongoing, or how will you sustain that? Because 12 months is just not enough. It needs to be there forever, really, doesn't it? Because there's just so much going on behind the scenes. And sorry, just in that as well, will that include, we say we've got opportunities for children? Does that come later, Chair, the opportunities one? I'll stop there then, Pauline. Thank you. Just on the mental health. Thanks very much for that. Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's fine. So the 12 months additional funding refers to the National Lottery Community Fund's decision to extend the Head Start programme by a further 12 months. So originally it was a 5-year programme, but because they understood the impact of the global pandemic, they made a decision to extend all of the funding for the 6 national Head Start programmes, of which we were one, by 12 months to really help us to work through the sustainability work that we knew we needed to do. So we've used that funding very much to continue to the activity that we were doing, but also to use that time to consolidate the research and evaluation that will evidence that work, and indeed that's gone forward to create really strong arguments for the continuation of some of that work.
Thank you, Councillor Critchley, and thank you, Pauline. That was an excellent summary. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll just move into questions for yourself, Vicky, on page 28, starting with ensure appropriate arrangements are in place.
Would you like me to give an overview, Chair?
Please, if you could, Vicky, yes.
Yeah, okay, no problem. So if I start with assurance in respect of troubled families funding. So just an overview, I'll just whistle stop through this. So we're reasonably confident that through our Supporting Families link, we will receive a further 3 years investment. And that will really support us in particular around a range of early help activities. So you will see in the register our family hubs. It's very important to say that we already have family hubs. We have 3 in Blackpool, but that funding will allow us to develop those hubs further. And those hubs really have a range of services based in one place there and really help to build those connections between our families in the local community and our services. So we've launched our early help strategy before Christmas in November. It's been very well received by our partners, and work is ongoing both strategically and operationally to really realise that vision. Early help and improving partnership responses are a key focus of our children's social care improvement work, and you will see that early help is actually featured on a number of occasions through the risk register. And the governance around that sits with the Children and Families Partnership Board, and we have a lot of external scrutiny and challenge, in particular from Ofsted and the Department for Education around that area of work. So, shall I pause there? Yep.
Yeah, do you want to cover the next 2 risks?
Yeah, I'll cover the next 2. Yeah, okay. So moving quite speedily on to Better Start. So just very briefly, Better Start's a 10-year strategic investment, which is really around improving outcomes for our youngest children in Blackpool. The council is one partner in that work. And just to say that sustainability has been written into that strategy since it was launched 7 years ago. Very good recent example of that is Baby Steps, which is an antenatal project. So it was tested out on a very small scale and then scaled up much bigger. An evidence base built up and is now commissioned as part of the 0 to 19 contract with health, and we've got staff placed in the hospital. So in terms of the sustainability, just a very small example of how we will scale those projects up from Better Start. The idea is that we will replicate that kind of model across the whole initiative. And again, those services are very much linked into our early help offer. And we're scaling up early help now and the early help workforce with a lot of those interventions. So that work is very much taking place now and is very much underway. So moving on to opportunity area. Again, very briefly as an overview, opportunity area, the programme has really supported aspiration and attainment in Blackpool, and it is in its final 6 months now. We're working really closely with the Department for Education and thinking about the legacy, sustainability of that programme and the projects within it. We've got the right governance in place to really take that forward. We've got an education improvement board that's really well established. It's well attended by schools and partners and it's chaired independently. And that work really links to a number of other key strategies, such as the early help strategy that I've touched on. And what we are working on right now is a sustainability matrix with the Department for Education, and that will look at leadership, resources, systems and culture. So I'll perhaps pause at that. I know I've whistle-stopped through that.
You did excellently. Well done, Vicky. Thank you very much for that. Right, we'll take questions. We've got 2 specific questions and then some general questions for you, Vicky, if I may. So I believe, Councillor Critchley, you have a question as regards to the final bit on page 28 there.
Chair, writing notes here, writing over myself. Hello there, good evening, and thank you for that whistle-top tour of. So my question is, what barriers do we face in delivering these mitigations? Can you just explain a bit further, please? Thank you.
Okay, in terms of barriers, and you'll see it's touched on around our sort of partnership response. And I think one of the key elements to be able to realise that is probably around supporting our partners. So by our partners, I'm talking about, you know, all our key partners, police, health, our voluntary sector as well, because we know we've got quite a number of voluntary sector organisations within Blackpool. And I think one of our really big challenges and barriers is supporting our partners to understand what early help means in its widest sense. So early help isn't just a strategy, we're just one part of that. It's actually a system. And I think of it really as a sort of wide ecosystem, and we're just one part of that. So I think that's one of our biggest barriers. It's supporting our partners to understand what their role in it is in it, how they can support it. Because for each of those partners, their role within that system may look quite different. So for the police within early help, clearly for the bobbies out on the beat, that's going to look very different to perhaps a health visitor. So I think the biggest challenge within all of that is perhaps our partners' response and supporting them to really understand their role in it and how they can support us. Is that okay?
Brilliant. Thank you, Councillor Critchley. Thank you, Vicky. I believe, Councillor Burgess, you have a question as regards the Better Start initiative.
Thanks, Vicky. My question is about just how you are continuing to implement the NSPCC in the Better Start initiative. I'm sorry. I just wonder if you can help us to visualise what all this looks like on the ground, and particularly for residents who are furthest from the hubs. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So, I know. Thank you, Councillor Burgess. I know I've probably just whistle-stopped over the hubs. Actually, I did consider perhaps whether going into a little bit more detail, because you're right in terms of sort of visualising what they look like. I'll try and perhaps go into a little bit more detail, and just perhaps a little bit of background to the hubs as well in Blackpool. So, as I said, hubs have been around for a while in Blackpool. You know, they're not completely new, but what we have done, so a little bit about sort of the government initiative, and you may have seen it in the media, and it links into the first 1001 days, which again, you may have seen out there. It's been quite a big news item and very much driven by Andrea Ledson. So the hubs, the idea behind the hubs is that we have a range of services within hubs. It's not just, although we're talking about young children here, it's actually not just young children. It takes us from 0 to 19, so it's a very comprehensive range of services. We think of it as being very much in person, but we know the world we're inhabiting now is not just about services in person. I think it's important to say that it's also about online services as well. But the key is our families will know how to access that. And from my experience, actually, and we know not all our families have access to online services, but a number do. And actually, from my experience, quite a lot of our families do like to work with us, you know, online. You know, we're getting much better at that now. So those hubs will have a range of services. There'll be multi-agency. So you will have connected in there, not just Better Start that we're talking about, or some of the sustainability projects from Better Start. You'll have other partners there as well. So health visitors, for example. So that very comprehensive range. And those hubs, we have one in North, one in Central, and one in South. And actually, as well as having the services in one place, we also have connectors out in the communities as well, because we recognise that obviously people can't always access those services in one place. So we have that really holistic support network around, but we do have them functioning from those 3 hubs. Is that helpful? Does that help perhaps describe them a little bit better?
To a degree. I think I'm interested in the connectors in the community and how they work.
I have to be very honest and say I don't have detailed information about the roles of connectors within Better Start, but my understanding in terms of their role is that I guess probably, you know, it's within the title that the idea behind that is to really bring those hard to reach families, and we do have hard to reach families in the community, to really connect them into those services and really tailor those services in a bespoke way to the needs of those hard to reach families. That's probably, Councillor Burdis, as much as I can tell you in any detail about that role, but that's my understanding.
I'm not sure if we're kind of straying off into
scrutiny territory, but
yeah.
no,
Okay.
it's
sorry about
no,
that.
no, not at all, not a problem, Councillor Burdis. Thank you. Thank you for that, Vicky. Thank you. I believe we have some more brief general questions. Councillor Critchley and then Jill, if I may.
Last one for me on this one. It just, for me, it's we've missed somebody out. I feel we've missed 2 sort of cohorts of people out of the mitigations, and where does special educational needs fit in with in all the sub 3A sub-risks, and also children that are being homeschooled because at school, because I feel there's a massive risk at the moment with our children that are being home educated. I'd like to think we're on top of it, but I know it's not that easy to always be in touch with hard to reach families. So I just wanted some clarification, please, on if they're being included and how they're being included. Thank you.
Yes, I mean, absolutely, you know, completely agree with you. You know, special educational needs, as we know, is extremely broad and stretches across the whole system. So absolutely. So, you know, when we think about early help, when we think about those early help services, absolutely that encapsulates the needs of our children that, as you say, have quite a, you know, we're talking about a very broad spectrum when we're talking about special educational needs, from a very low level to obviously some of our children and young people have much more complex needs. So absolutely that early help response is absolutely covers our children that have SEND issues. In terms of children educated at home, to provide some reassurance, we're very clear about who those children are in Blackpool. We understand that cohort of children, we understand our statutory responsibilities. We do go above and beyond in Blackpool because we recognise that actually they have the potential to be a vulnerable cohort of young people, especially within the pandemic. So actually the work that we're doing is we have a very robust system in place to review those children, to make sure that they're connected in with the other services that we've got, to make sure they're able to access that early help offer. And actually we are consistently reviewing those children. That includes, you know, visits, we visit them at home, and that's above and beyond our statutory requirements.
Is there any data collected on that when you say, you know, very good, we're looking after it? Is there any data that you could bring to us next time just to show us what goes on and how you collect that data?
Absolutely, you know, I can bring that data. So as I say, we know who those children are. we're able to cross-reference them in terms of whether they're open to any other services. So we're very able to understand those children that might have additional vulnerabilities, whether it be SEND issues, as you know, that we've touched on, or whether it might be a range of other vulnerabilities. So we're very able with our systems to not only understand who they are, but to be able to cross-reference them with other vulnerabilities that those children and young people might be experiencing.
Thank you, Councillor Critchley. Vicky, final question, I believe, is from Jill.
Thank you, Chair. Vicky, just a question for you, but actually it's not just about section 3A, it's 3B and 3C. Why are all the target dates for the actions March 2022?
Okay. Yes, I can see what you're saying. They do appear to be, yeah, I accept they do probably, they're probably, some of them are probably quite longer than that. So certainly in terms of early help, we do have a 2-year strategy in place. So I think that, I'm not sure perhaps if that's more of a review point, but I accept what you're saying. You know, they are longer term pieces of work.
Yeah, it does look like a review date rather than a...
I think they are a review date. As I say, early help, we've got a 2-year strategy in place. So I think they are more sort of touch points in terms of reviews.
Okay, it just for future, it might be to look at that and put a more realistic timescale on it.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jill. Thanks, Vicky. Your work is not done yet, though, Vicky. We will be calling you back in for the second half of this.
That's okay. Thank you.
Have a breather whilst we do the next bit.
Thank you.
So the next part of the risk register is 3B, the unpredictability of legal rulings requiring an unexpected change or change to the risk environment. I'm not sure who's covering this for us. Is this yourself, Alan, or yourself, Chief, or you, Mark?
Chair.
For a time lucky. Thank you. Cheers, Mark.
Okay, so this, again, this has been on the risk register for a number of years. You can see by the existing controls in place there what we have, they were sort of potential risks that we've managed to negate, and they're sort of strengthened through various processes, not least in the last pandemic, last year of the pandemic, I beg your pardon, where we've had to sort of act quickly to new regulations and directions and guidance and update officers accordingly. And Dawn Goodall, the head of legal, and her team have worked hard at that and developed a very effective system. The actual outstanding action with regard to this area was in relation to work with Tracy's team, in particular with the risk and resilience team around insurance and strengthening that relationship between the legal team and that team. And hopefully Tracy can answer any more specific questions if members have them on the insurance side of things. But basically, we've as part of the review of the structures that's mentioned as one of the existing controls, James Holmes has got a lead role within the dealing with the claims, and he works under a new team leader there. And again, that working relationship with key people from Tracy's team has shown by the current position has been developed in particular over the last 12 months, and again will continue to be strengthened with that involvement and that awareness. That's a brief overview, Chair.
That was excellent. Thank you, Mark. Brilliant. Very good. I believe, Councillor Scott, you're going to reply.
Chair, Councillor Scott, I don't believe you've got your microphone on.
Apologies, my fault.
Yeah. Sorry, is that better?
Yes, thank you.
Right, sorry about that. Yeah, with all the controls that have been put in place, has this how has it affected the legal cases against the council? Has it put us in a better position? And there's not as many, you know, it can be the pitfalls can be seen before it gets too late. Is what I'm trying to say, and we've identified those cases that we think are the most serious.
Chair. I think I can't really give any specific numbers in that sense. I think what I can say is that the in-house resource, as part of the restructure that we've done, particularly in the children's social care area, has been strengthened, which has meant that a lot more knowledge and experience is retained in-house, and we're trying to reduce the external council spend as well, and that's been particularly a key area that's worked well in dealing with child protection issues and things like that with the Vicky's area. And again, we've got a team there that's worked really well. So I think, and we've got a new team leader in the regeneration and property side, who again has come from the private sector with a lot of expertise. So what we're trying to do is obviously retain that knowledge in the in-house team and strengthen that resource accordingly.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Mark. Committee's clearly very happy with progress there by the fact you only got one question. Take that as a compliment.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Vicky and I also believe Kate are going to take us through the next item on the risk register, which is 3C, increasing number of looked after children and child protection cases resulting in a need to change the council's approach. The significant part about this is obviously it's weighting as well at 50% of the risk. Kate, if you could take us through your elements, and then Vicky, yours, and then we'll go to questions if that's okay.
One that we're looking for much of this work to be completed hopefully by March 2022, because this is about us being clear with market providers and with providers of services across children's services about where there is sufficiency in the market for support for young people who are in need of support, including those who are in need of care because they're looked after by the local authority, and to make sure that we're very clear with providers where we might need some further development within the market, where we may have room for more capacity. So those sufficiency strategies are being developed as we speak, and they cover the full spectrum of needs from early help through to, as I say, that very specific care for children who can't live in the family home. And it includes the relationship that we need to have with health. So some of those sufficiency strategies will touch on both health and social care, not just social care alone, because sometimes we do have joint commissioning arrangements with our health colleagues. And as it says in the current position, we're not doing this in splendid isolation for our market. So for some of those areas where luckily we have very small numbers of children who need residential care, more than we would like, but we work in partnership with Lancashire, Blackburn, with Darwin and South Cumbria on developing a rich market that can meet a spectrum of needs. And we're also working with our independent foster care market. So I'm sure members will be aware that we've made significant investment into developing our internal foster care market, into having a direct relationship with foster carers here in Blackpool, which is brilliant. But there will be some times when we need to look to the market to develop a foster care relationship. And it's important that we have a really strong commissioning and performance relationship with those providers. So we're doing that on a joint basis as well. And we need to get those sufficiency strategies sorted, because we're entering in the next few months into tendering arrangements as a whole area for new arrangements for those providers.
Okay. Thank you, Kate. Vicky, is there anything that you want to add as regards to the sub-risk of 3C?
Just to pick up on the next section about reducing the number of children looked after. Yeah.
Please.
Okay. Yeah. So if I can give an overview, thank you, Chair. So I'm going to touch very briefly on the early help system to start with, because we know that's actually a crucial element of reducing statutory demand. You know, at that very high level, we need to try and work with children and families at the lowest possible level that we can. So, you know, I won't repeat myself. We've launched that strategy. It's underway. You know, we're well on our way with that. Stabilising the workforce is also an essential component in relation to children looked after. We've got a workforce strategy in place now. It's managed through a workforce board. We've got a permanent management structure in place, and we're really developing them through a strong leadership and training offer. Our very recent Ofsted visit has reflected increasing confidence in our workforce stability, and that letter will be published on the 15th of February. In relation to gatekeeping around our children looked after, you can see the references around the panel system that we have in place. We continue those panels. We have a range of them to really quality assure and put critical challenge in around the plans in relation to children coming into care. We're on a downward trajectory with our child protection plans per rate of 10,000, and we're starting to bring ourselves nearer in line with our comparator authorities and within the region. In terms of our children looked after numbers, in the last quarter, our number of children remained steady. Our numbers are just above 590 now, so that's 12% down from our peak back in May 2020. And during the last 6 months, we've had 83 children leave our care system. And then I'll just touch very briefly, Chair, on the Family Together team as well. I'll only be very brief because you can see the data very clearly there. We have started and we are regularly evaluating the effectiveness of that team. It's been in place some time now in Blackpool, and it is starting to make a difference. Again, if we link this to the wider system around early help, around our demand management, about that real need to keep children as far down the system as we can see from that work that we are being effective in stepping those children down from child in need plans and child protection plans. Thank you, Chair. I'll pause there.
You did very well, Vicky and Kate, to summarise that complexity in such a short amount of time. Thank you both. We have a number of questions. I'll lead on the first two. The first one, Kate, is for yourself in terms of the sufficiency strategy. Very simply, what does success look like in this area? That's for yourself, Kate.
I think in terms of the strategy, success looks like clarity for the market on where we would like to see growth, and also where we don't have a need for investment or growth. So real clarity on where providers can add value to supporting better outcomes for young people in Blackpool. In terms of those services, having them as close to home as possible, wherever possible. So having services available here in Blackpool or as part of the wider Fylde Coast and Lancashire areas. As a result of that strategy, encouraging the right type of growth would be success.
Excellent. And do you face any barriers that you feel the committee should be aware of in delivering that success?
So yes, I think it's fair to say that there are barriers. I don't think they're unique to our area. Clearly the volume of young people who are in our care is in itself a barrier to having the right degree of sufficiency and choice and control for those young people in the market. But I think we've got some really good local controls and understanding of how we're going to address that. But nationally, there is increasing pressure on the market, particularly for children who are looked after. And there is no requirement on our market to be locally focused. And there are areas of the country with huge sufficiency issues. And because they're unable to develop the market in their area, there is no doubt that we will continue to see people look to build capacity here in Blackpool and the surrounding area to meet the needs of local authorities who are placing at some distance.
Thank you, Kate. That was, again, a good summary. Thank you for that. Vicky, moving on to the reduced numbers of looked after children. There's been a huge amount of work in this area since I was first elected, and not just in children's services, but in other areas, housing as well, and a huge investment in green spaces connected to areas through the Better Start programme. In terms of those numbers, the cumulative effect of all of that work, do you feel instinctively that we have reached a medium, or those numbers will continue to decline based on the fruits of that work starting to play out over the next 10 years?
Well, I think my starting point is, you know, it is, as you've already stated, Chair, it's an incredibly complex area of work and actually can be unpredictable at times. You know, we're working in a people business where sometimes things happen that can't be totally predicted. So, you know, I want to sort of put that caveat in really at the start, you know, so it is very complex. But in terms of have we reached a medium, I would say no. I would say that we can still continue to improve and we can still have that downward trajectory in the same way that we're starting to have that trajectory around child protection plans. But what I would say is it's not easy. You know, it is very steady progress. And I suppose on many levels, we can think about it in line with some of the wider improvement plan, which I know I'll try not to make this answer too long because I know I could probably talk for a very, very long time on this. So I'll try and make it as succinct as I can. So if we link it to the journey that social care is on, you know, we are 2 years, well, more than 2 years now through our improvement journey. And the journey around reducing the number of children looked after in many ways sits in line with that. The complexities that link into improving that work are the complexities around that wider improvement plan. So everything I've touched on already, increased stability, you know, improving our practice, improving our consistency, all of those things as we start to move forward and out of intervention over this next year will start to have a benefit also on reducing our number of children looked after. It's really probably quite difficult to give you a succinct answer to this question. So I don't know if that's helpful because I probably could talk a lot more about it.
No, that was a tough question to expect a short answer from it. So no, you've done brilliantly, as have your team in the work that they've done. If I may, there are just a couple of other questions. Councillor Critchley, then I'll bring Councillor Hunter in. Councillor Critchley, I believe you had a question about edge of care.
Yes, Chair. Just a quick one on edge of care, really, and it's just that how will you, what barriers do you face in making it happen, and at what cost? And just following on from your last one, my worry for this year is, with everything that's going on with housing, poverty, fuel poverty, food banks and everything else, do you feel the situation might get worse before it actually gets better, and what mitigations can we put in place to try and sort of mitigate them things that are staring us in the face at this moment in time, I suppose. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Critchley. So if we start about sort of thinking about some of the barriers really around edge of care work, I think probably the starting point is think about edge of care work in line with the early help work and the early help strategy and that early help ecosystem that I've touched on earlier. You know, edge of care work really falls within that. So I think we've got an edge of care offer in place. I think it's a piece of work that we will continue to evaluate and develop this year. So, you know, the wheels don't stand still on that. We're constantly looking at whether we can improve that. So, for example, we know that some of our challenges around adolescents, you know, they're quite difficult for us. So we're constantly reviewing that. But I think some of the barriers we face are very similar to some of that wider early help offer. They're about our support from partners, about them understanding what edge of care, what they can do, their role in it. And we know there's a myriad of challenges for them as well. You know, my experience in Blackpool today is that we've had a very, very good reception from our partners, but they face a lot of challenges of their own. You know, for health, we know that some of their priorities have had to shift over recent times. So I think some of the barriers that we face are probably in extending that edge of care support and how we think about edge of care into the wider partnership. And as I say, that work is ongoing now. We have that in place at a strategic level, at an operational level. And I have to say those partnerships are really, really good. And people are working collaboratively together and constantly trying to look at our performance, look at new ideas, think about different ways we can work together around that edge of care, because it is a very challenging area of the work for Blackpool. Is that helpful before we think about some of the other challenges?
Yeah, it is. Thanks very much for that.
Again, it is a challenge trying to make these answers succinct. So in terms of some of the other issues that we face going forward, I think you're absolutely right, Councillor Critchley. And I know in particular, I'm thinking about some of the fuel challenges that we've got, which we know have that potential to hit our families very hard, actually, post-April. So we are thinking about that. And I think you're absolutely right. We know that the challenges our families, or a lot of our families, face are great enough now, and that is going to, you know, I don't think we can get away from the fact that that will have the potential to place additional burdens and additional stress. I guess it's all the more relevant that we need to develop those family hubs further, and the work we've touched on before, the connecting work into the hard to reach families, understanding who they are. Not all families want to access family hubs. We know that. Not all families want to put their hand up and ask for support. So I think you're absolutely right. I think it's something that we need to be very watchful of. We need to think about how and what we can do to connect even further into those sort of hard to reach areas and hard to reach families for Blackpool.
Thanks very much, Vicky. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you,
Thank
Councillor
you.
Thank you. And just finally bring Councillor Hunter in.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Quite a simple question, actually. Over the last, I think it's 21 months now, what impact would you say COVID has had on the delivery of the various mitigations that you have in place and the plans for improvement?
Okay. So specifically in relation to this area, I would say in terms of sort of just on a very general level, in terms of that delivery of that improvement work and specifically in relation to children looked after, I actually think that Blackpool and children's social care and that improvement work has done exceptionally well. And on many levels, yes, it's been a challenge, but for all the reasons that we know, trying to deliver that improvement work. So I touched on the panels before and some of that gateway into care. All of that has had to be done online, a vast chunk of it. So in terms of has it had an impact, I think it's made the work more challenging at times. I think in terms of the workforce that we've touched on, that's been a key component of that improvement work. Clearly trying to nurture a workforce, develop them, keep them focused on these improvements, manage all that work that I've just touched on. It has made it more challenging without a shadow of a doubt. But what I would say is, despite all of that, we still managed to deliver on it. And I think, I know I touched before on our very recent Ofsted visit, that was last week. We're due the letter very soon. And, you know, we have continued to deliver on those improvements, and we've made that steady progress against our improvement plan and against all the work that I've touched on. So I think it has been hard, it has been challenging, but I think we've still delivered and we are still on target and making progress against our improvement plan.
Excellent. Thank you, Councillor Hunter. May I say, Vicky and Kate, you've done an excellent job for those 21 months, and you've done an excellent job tonight. And the Audit Committee fully endorses all of these efforts in all of these key crucial areas for the Council. So you have our full support in that journey.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I believe you're free to go.
Thank you very much. Thank
Take
you
care.
and good evening.
Bye-bye. Right, now then, normally this time of night when you reach only agenda item 5 at 7:30, normally it means you're in trouble, but in our case, that's not the case. Steve. We're on to the management response to the accounts. Do you want to lead that item for us?
If you recall at the last meeting in November, we brought the draft accounts and the draft ISA 260 from Deloitte, of which there were some management observations and recommendations. I thought it was relevant to bring these back to the committee as soon as possible, though I understand an updated ISA 260 will come to the next audit committee with the final accounts. So hopefully they won't have changed. If I could just go through each of the 5 in turn, they were all prioritised medium, so there were no high priority recommendations in there, which is good. The first one was around exit packages, in that the external auditors couldn't find copies of some of them during 2021, which is disappointing, and we've taken that up with HR to make sure that doesn't happen in future. The second one is around valuation of heritage assets, which hasn't been undertaken for some years. I've instructed my staff now to incorporate these in the 4-yearly cycle of valuations, and it will also inform insurances as well, and that will cover everything from the mayoral chain to the art collection, for instance. The last 3 all relate to IT access. The first one is around mirroring access, which external auditors didn't seem to like, but when you've got so many people, some of which there are commonalities of roles and responsibilities, whilst with some turnover, you would still undertake a review of roles, but the expectation was that previous roles would be mirrored with the new starters roles. So I don't quite fully accept that, but nonetheless, my staff have taken that on board, and it will certainly be automated and prompted within the new financial system, which will be going live in April 2023. In relation to access by leavers, again, external auditors didn't like the fact that we were only undertaking this on a monthly cycle. There are mitigations in place, though, that when people do leave the organisation, their devices through which is the only route of accessing council systems are collected from them, and also access to the buildings as well. So that mitigates considerably that particular point. And I think to undertake this on a real-time basis would be quite prohibitive. And the third one was around reviewing user access. My colleagues have accepted this and have agreed to undertake it on a quarterly review basis. Again, I think that's a bit too frequent. And I'd be quite happy if it was undertaken at perhaps the annual appraisal process when job descriptions themselves are reviewed by individuals. But this is what my staff have incorporated, and perhaps with the new system going live as well in April 23, we'll incorporate some auto prompts as well within that. So happy to take any questions or comments or observations on that.
Brilliant, thank you, Steve. Just before we go to questions, Nicola, was there anything that you wanted to add at all?
No, I mean, it's really helpful to have the responses so quickly after the report, and we're comfortable with the responses the council's put forward.
Brilliant, thank you, Nicola, thank you. Councillor Mitchell, I believe you're going to lead our response.
Thank you. It was about the valuation of assets, and there's been some recent publicity about quite a well-known statue that had gone missing, but we didn't seem to know it had gone missing, or at least councils were alerted to the fact. Is it necessary to check the physical assets to ensure that they're not damaged or missing?
Sorry, could you repeat that last bit? Is it?
Yeah, just about assets. Should they be physically checked periodically to ensure that they're not damaged or missing?
Absolutely, as part of the annual inventory, that will be incorporated in future. I think there are lessons to be learned from that particular episode.
Thank you, Councillor Mitchell. Bringing Councillor Hunter.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's a question for Steve, but I'm not too sure actually. But it's amongst the observations of the auditors. It does say that during the testing, they identified that the council does not retain a copy of the signed exit package agreement, etc., etc. Now, the response does address that by saying for a small number of the exit packages, the final signed copy was not kept in the system. Now, given that the auditors were probably just picking a sample, we seem to be rather unfortunate that they happened to pick the ones that where we haven't kept them. No, I do welcome the fact that this is to be monitored on a regular basis going forward. You know, could we ensure that it was monitored in such a way that all these exit packages were retained by the council? But I think something like that is most important. Thank you.
Steve, do you want to come back on that?
I can't explain how that happened in the first place. All I can say is that, you know, HR have been reminded of this, and for 21-22 there is a 100% evidence of that. But 2021, sorry, is inexplicable.
Okay, thank you, Steve, for that, and Councillor Hunter as well. I don't see any further questions, so we will move on. Thank you for that, Steve. Thank you. Tracy, agenda item 7. It's you've been very quiet tonight, so now you've got 20 minutes. I've kept you 20 minutes aside because I've noticed recently we have been rushing through these quarter 2 reports. Certainly we rushed through that one. So if you could take us through, Tracy, pages 61 to 70, and then we'll go through questions and then do the final part of the report after that.
Of course, thank you, Chair. So in terms of the internal audit plan, I'm not quite where I would like to be at the end of quarter 3 with only 58% completed. That's due primarily to a number of recruitment issues that we've had during the year. However, I'm pleased to report to the committee that by the end of the quarter, the team was up to full establishment. So I am confident that over the next 3 months, we will make gains on the audit plan, and I estimate completing around 90%, which will give me an adequate level of assurance to write my annual opinion. With regards to the fraud team, again, progress against the fraud prevention charter has been somewhat hampered, in part due to resourcing issues and also due to the various government grants where the team have been doing pre and post assurance work as a result of the pandemic. Again, I'm pleased to report that the team is now up to capacity and has started to make some inroads into the fraud prevention action plan. That said, with the new Omicron business grants which have come into effect, the team will be diverted over the coming weeks doing the pre-assurance work so we can get those grants out to businesses as soon as possible. With regards to risk management, we're seeing increased requests for project risk registers to be facilitated by myself or the team, which is a really positive step in terms of continuing with our journey to embed risk management throughout the council. On the less positive side, we are experiencing an extremely hard insurance market at the moment, which is making it much more difficult to enable the council to transfer risks, some risks anyway, to insurers, particularly around property risks at the moment. So we're continuing to work both with council's insurers and also with project managers to put in place the best risk mitigations we can to help us to secure a level of cover. So that's work in progress. And the health and safety team have continued to provide support as they have been doing in relation to COVID secure throughout the pandemic, as well as picking up on usual health and safety matters. and it's pleasing to report that we had no new RIDDLE reportable cases in the quarter, which is showing good health and safety practices across the board. Focusing on the performance data, the updating of business continuity plans and in particular risk registers has improved since my last report to the committee, which is pleasing to see. And where we have got gaps, it's not that there isn't a risk register or business continuity plan in place. Absolutely there is. They just need refreshing and bringing up to date. So we're working with the services to facilitate that and enable it to happen. And I'll pause at that point and take any questions.
Brilliant. Thank you, Tracy. That was an excellent summary as ever. Questions? Councillor Burdes on page 68. Do you want me to come? I'll bring you in a second. Do you want me to bring you in a second, or are you okay now? You're okay now? Yeah. Councillor Burdes, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Chair. It's just about the fraud awareness training. My question is, do you feel that, especially with children's services, you can see with some of the directorates that the numbers have fallen, and especially with children's services quite substantially. Do you feel that's satisfactory, and what would be the how would you improve that in the future? Because as I look across that chart, even those who haven't hit whose numbers are low, you can see they're going upwards, so they're actually improving. But for children's services, it has gone down quite considerably, so that is a concern. How do you intend to address that?
Thank you, Councillor Burdes. Where we see movement, particularly downward movement, that tends to be related to staff turnover. So it's staff who've left the organisation, who fall off the statistics, and we're bringing new staff into the organisation who have yet to complete the training. I provide all the chief officers with a quarterly report outlining the staff where the training still needs to be completed, just so we make sure that that doesn't fall off the radar, and that's done on a quarterly basis.
Thank you. That answers the question perfectly. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Burdes. Thank you. Just a brief question for myself around the emergency response volunteers, Tracy. This is a conversation we've had on several occasions. I was checking the minutes from this meeting 12 months ago for another item, and then I thought I'd just check this stat as well, and it was exactly on 27 12 months ago. So what is the barrier as regards recruiting people to become, or our staff members to become volunteers, that seems to have created this ceiling of 27 against 50?
Thank you, Chair. I think we've changed our approach at the council for dealing with emergency response group volunteers. So the target of 50, which has been in place for quite some time, doesn't really reflect the reducing services across the council. And we've now moved to a more county-wide approach. So we have mutual aid agreements in place with both Lancashire and Blackburn, so that if we haven't got enough volunteers, we can go to those other organisations to help provide volunteers for us. We have asked for the overall numbers, but we haven't received those as of yet. So that's something we're going to chase for the Pan Lancashire footprint. But for the new financial year, I will be revising the number of council volunteers in the target, so it's a more true reflection.
Okay, I'll bring the Chief in as well, if I may. Chief?
Yeah, I think that target of 50 hasn't been exactly scientifically calculated. And I think the other thing to remember within the emergency response is we have duty officers in many services who would respond during those particular crises. So it would be a flood, for instance, or a building which was damaged. Then you would have a duty officer from highways, a duty officer who would be building control. There would also be the emergency duty team who would deal with anybody who was vulnerable in need of additional support. So this is the people who will basically staff up a community centre and make sure it's open, that nobody stood out in the rain or the cold if we have to empty a street, for instance. And generally speaking, we seek to avoid, certainly during the pandemic, that's been the case, avoid using a community centre unless we absolutely have to, because it's bringing people from multiple households together in a small space. The last time we had such an occasion, the majority of people went quickly to a friend or a relative and to stay until they could rehab their house. So I suppose we do need a review of exactly what is necessary, and also the genuine availability of all the people on the list, because it does tend to be the same dozen people who are called upon on a regular basis, and all of whom do it for free as well. They are on that list and they will show up as and when necessary. But because we do it on a voluntary basis, then obviously we go down the Vitaline services, is our 24/7 out of our service for everything, including supporting the vulnerable. They will go down the list until they find somebody who's available. And they've never got to the bottom. So there is quite a bit of capacity there, but I think it needs a scientific review about exactly how many is necessary and how available people are, bearing in mind that they are there to support the duty officers who are on call permanently. Obviously not the same person.
Thank you, Chief. That was a good summary. Thank you. Final one from me, Tracy. I'll be very quick. It's going to be one of those tough ones because it's probably a really complex answer. The fraud stats on page 69. You normally know where I'm going to go with this now, which is haven't we got a lot of honest people around? So either that's one idea, or the data isn't quite as accurate as it could be. So I guess the question is, what type of impact has the pandemic had on this area in terms of fraud detection? And crucially, and I guess this is a really crucial part, is as we move into sort of an endemic world rather than a pandemic one, do you have a strategy to say, right, now I'm going to have some resource, I really can't wait to get my teeth into that particular area that I've had to prioritise other things against?
Thank you, Chair. Absolutely, the pandemic has had a huge impact on the capacity within the corporate fraud team because of all the business support grant work which we've had to quite rightly prioritise. And that means we haven't been able to do some of our proactive work in order to identify some frauds. So we've had to pause that, certainly for the lower risk fraud areas. The other side is in relation to fraud investigations. Some of those we haven't been able to progress because of the COVID secure arrangements in place. We haven't been able to safely do interviews under caution, but with the lifting of restrictions, we will now be able to pick that up. So going forward, once we've got this latest round of business grants out of the way, going forward, we should be able to see an increase in those figures as we do a lot more proactive work.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tracy. That's excellent to hear. I can almost sense the anticipation for you there as well as you're about to do that journey. Okay, if you could take us on the second half of the report, page 70 onwards. Oh, sorry. Sorry, Councillor Mitchell, I couldn't see you. Apologies.
Question to Tracy. Just looking at page 69, NFI, I think that's the National Fraud Initiative, and well, two boxes. One, NFI 2021/21, should that be 2021 perhaps? There's sort of total £134,000 of fraud has been recovered. And also NFI single person discount proactive exercise, and 2026 referrals made, and grand total of £862 fraud identified. I'm just wondering what's gone on there. Have all those cases been scrutinised, and was that good value for money?
Thank you, Councillor Mitchell. So in terms of the National Fraud Initiative, the main programme, that's run every 2 years. So the 2020 programme, as it's titled, is currently ongoing, and we're getting some good results there, certainly in terms of error. The single person discount work has been on pause somewhat, given the other priorities of the corporate fraud team. That data is refreshed actually on an annual basis, and we are due to receive the new National Fraud Initiative data in the next couple of months. So as soon as we have capacity back in the team, that will be a priority area for us. So again, we shall see some improvements there.
Chair, just looking further up the page, gross misconduct disciplinary code, and quite a large sum there, £25,000, and it's a lot of money to go missing when there's been so few cases involved. Are you able to tell us a little bit more about how that was allowed to happen?
That was actually an error, which was identified as part of an investigation that we carried out, and it was in relation to a payroll overpayment.
Okay. Did we get any money back?
There is a repayment plan in place, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mitchell. Tracy, would you like to take us through the final half of the report, page 70 onwards, please?
Of course, thank you, Chair. So the main section of this report is the assurance statements from the internal audit work that's been completed within the quarter. So overall, it was positive assurance that we've been able to give for a number of areas. The exceptions to that were 4 reviews in particular. The first being care at home, which we gave adequate assurance for the vast majority of areas. The one area we gave as inadequate was in relation to training completion within the service. And you'll see from the comprehensive management response included in my report that a lot of work has been done by the service to address that risk and reduce that priority 1 recommendation down since the audit, which is great progress. In relation to compliance with corporate arrangements, we are doing some work with each of the directors to provide a bit more detail to ensure a more consistent approach to compliance across the council. So that's in hand. The governance of wholly owned companies has split assurance. I won't go into too much more detail because Mark's already referenced that report and the extra work which needs to be done around risk management. And in relation to the energy management audit, we did give that inadequate assurance for 2 priority 1 recommendations around billing and reconciliation. And I've been asked to include another review of energy management on the new internal audit plan, which will be coming to the next committee, just to make sure that those areas have been fully addressed. And then from page H1 to the end of the report, it's the usual information I provide to committee, including progress against priority 1 recommendations, any covert surveillance which has been undertaken, and also insurance claims.
Excellent, Tracy. Thank you for that. Jill, I believe you have a question.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question. Not so sure who can answer this really. So it's about the audit that was undertaken with energy management, which you've just touched upon, Tracy. Does the team, do you think, or I don't know whether you would know, whether the chief would know, does this particular team face any additional challenges or barriers elsewhere that the audit committee should know about? Thank you.
Perhaps if I could answer that one, as energy falls under my team, procurement and energy. I'm not going to offer any excuses. I'm really disappointed with the performance here. To be fair, the energy and utility companies themselves are not very good at invoicing and reconciling, and which doesn't help. But what we're doing going forward is separating the developmental stuff, particularly around climate emergency, from the day-to-day billing and reconciliation, and we need to learn to do the boring stuff well. And we've got an energy meeting coming up next on the 11th of February. It'll be at the top of the agenda there, I can assure you.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. I know that look. I wouldn't want to be on the receiving end of it. Okay. Do we have any other questions in this area for Tracy at all? No? Okay. Excellent. On to the final item of the night, which is the date of the next meeting. To note, it will be the 3rd of March, and who knows where that will be. So thank you ever so much, everyone. I really enjoyed that. We've got some good work done, and we are finished at 7:59, so very pleased. Take care, everyone. Good night.